Hey everyone, so today we have Ryan, the founder of Hourly. Hourly is a very unique flexible talent platform in that it enables the flexibility without the risk. Now, not to spoil the whole episode or the plot, but let me get a little bit deep into one of the most important aspects of this episode. And that is that within the realm of flexible talent, there is literally everything for you. And if you skew higher on the risk coverage, if you really want to have zero risk, then a company like Hourly is the perfect solution. Now, let's just hit the head on when we say flexible talent. What do we mean? We mean gig, freelance, fractional, and increasingly digital workers. Now, the reason that's important is because historically you've heard terms like freelance economy, gig workers, and increasingly fractional. And the assumption is that these are all external, free agents, independent contractors, but the reality is a lot more detailed and simple if you're the end company doing the hiring right now. So when looking at someone like Ryan has 10 plus years of a Robert Half traditional talent type experience. He's been an executive, so he knows that it's not as simple as let's just go build a freelance marketplace, which was V1 of this industry. He knows that it's more about the flexibility to scale up and down when needed. It's about the exact expertise, and he even knows from the individual's perspective that working independently can be better for you. But he also knows that there does need to be something in the middle. Now, not to get too confusing as well, there are so many different types of solutions. And the reason that this episode is very important for you is because a lot of times the solution depends on the relationship you have with your partner. So there is no one perfect solution. There is the best of depending on a company's unique requirements. And we're going to cover that in this episode. But most importantly, I'm so excited for you to meet Ryan, to see this unique spin of the flexible talent industry. And then most importantly, for you to go out there and for you to go drive some change. So without further ado, enjoy this episode. Ryan, thank you so much for hopping on. For you listeners out there, make sure you're watching the video because I'm going to use really quick. So if you look at Ryan's background and mine, you can see we have literally the same dogs. Mine is passed out. His is passed out. That is beyond perfect. And it's going to be a trip for me, Ryan, because every time I look now at yours, I think it's Luca. So this is going to be
kind of a mirror reflection. Whose dog is moving?
Yeah, man. Maybe if we sound really dumb, we'll have our dogs do the talking, and it'll be the first ever dog-to-dog podcast. Everyone's obsessed with AI, but we're going to really kind of say F that and just go dog-to-dog.
Exactly.
So, but cool. Well, listen, Ryan, we're pumped to have you. I think this is a fun one because we know a little bit about your business, and you've been around since 2020, right? So this is not a first time new to the industry, but it's going to be fun to learn. And you have a really, really cool background, especially with as much experience as you had over at Robert Half, and a lot of lessons that I'm sure you're like, hey, as an industry, we probably should learn from this and not repeat this. So we're pumped to have you. But I think let's start with a quick intro on yourself, and obviously, and also where are you calling from?
Yeah, calling in today from Minneapolis, Minnesota, heart of the Midwest. A bit about my background: founder and CEO, as you mentioned, of Hourly.io. But prior to this, I'd like to think that I have a lot of experience in this industry. I had about 14 years in the professional temporary staffing space, before Hourly, and I would say roughly 20 years of total experience in flexible labor marketplaces, all in.
I love it. Now, I'm going to ask you a funny question, okay? Can you say Hourly again, the full name?
Hourly, I always say it as hourly.io, but it's spelled OURLY.io.
Okay, here's why. Do you know why I asked you?
What?
So just hit me. The .io handle is I think every Midwesterner should have to choose that handle because that's when we really can hear your accent when you say the .io. Right? Is that how it sounds like?
Yeah.
.io? So that, man, I'm going to have a field day ride now having you repeat that. And every keynote you do and panel we do together are going to be like, hey, Ryan, can you tell me about your company name again? And you're going to be like, shut up.
CIO, yeah. I've been in Minnesota for about 25 years now. I used to have a Montana accent, which was a little bit more neutral, but you live here long enough and you pick up on the local dialect.
That is so funny. Well, listen, tell us about hourly. Now that we've ripped on you enough about the accent, and you know what I'll do on panels? I'm going to like ask you to say the name and then ask the audience to guess where you're from.
Guess where I'm from. Yeah, we'll make it a secret.
Make it a secret, but yeah, man, tell us about hourly.
Yeah, hourly is most simply described, and I would put this out there as a compliment to some of the other great, businesses that are innovating in this space. But basically, hourly is like Upwork for W-2 knowledge workers. And our big differentiator and go to market is we felt there needed to be a platform that was specific to individuals who wanted to work on a W-2 basis versus being like an independent contractor or freelancers. So we use a lot of the same technologies and tools and techniques, but with a very specific candidate focus, if you will.
So let me ask the immediate for you listeners out there, if this is what you were going to ask, it's because you're deep in the weeds. And if this is not what you were going to ask, then give it a couple months of listening to the podcast and you'll probably ask it. So Ryan, my first question for you is tell us about this massive contradiction of freelance platform of W-2 workers. Because for you listeners out there, I think most of you know, but just to give a quick, little abstract. So W-2 versus 1099. 1099 equals independent contractor, your own business, you file your own taxes, you have your own benefits, yada, yada, yada. W-2 is similarly thought of as employment, but so the company's paying your taxes, the company's usually providing you benefits. It's kind of weird gray. You just assume W-2 equals full-time, but you can have part-time W-2, which is kind of weird. But so let me just ask you, Ryan, this sounds like a massive contradiction. We're talking freelance, yet W-2. Tell me about this massive, massive contradiction.
When we looked at it, and I leveraged, my prior 14 years of experience in this space, when we sat down and really thought about the power of like the online labor marketplaces, and then we looked at who was involved 5 or 6 years ago, and we noticed that typically all the platforms were catering towards that 1099, freelance independent contractor space. And when we looked at our experience of individuals that we recruited in my last job, about 80% of the individuals, when they had a choice of how to work, and it was a free choice, roughly 80% chose to work on a W-2 basis. The barrier of entry is much smaller. You sign up, you get a job. We act as the employer of record, so we handle payroll, project insurance, benefits, workers' comp, overtime. It's quite honestly, it's like the easy button. It's the big red easy button in front of you that makes it easy to transition from like a traditional perm job into, a consultant or contractor. And we thought that big part of the market was severely underserved, and we thought that there was an opportunity for us to innovate in this space.
So can we get like super deep on the contractual logistics of what we mean by W-2? So let's a typical person. So we could say, all right, I've been working at Robert Half for 10 plus years. I want to go independent, but I don't want to go, sell 60% of the time, go apply to 100, different freelance projects. I do still want the stability and the security. So that W-2, does that mean that I'm working 40 hours a week for one employer and I'm getting the benefits? Tell me, what do we mean by this W-2 contract?
Yeah, great question. Not everybody has to work on a full-time basis. So we have consultants that prefer 40 plus hours a week. We have consultants that prefer a more like standard schedule. So we would call that roughly 32 to 40 hours a week. And then we have individuals that want a lot of flexibility for themselves, oftentimes like working parents, if you will. And, they want less or they want more variable hours. I would say for us, the average right now, like work week is about 36 hours for a full-time W-2 employee. And we act as the employer of record, which means, we're doing all the payroll, we're doing all the taxes, but it also lets us bundle up and provide benefits to make this feel like a quote unquote, real job. And I think in the past, people looked at maybe temporary employees as lesser or individuals that couldn't find a perm position. And I think the industry in like the last 10 years has really flipped, where these are individuals who don't need one employer to provide value in the marketplace. Like they're in control of when and how and what they do for a job. So we can provide that flexibility to them, but continuity of benefits. So like all of our consultants get 3 weeks of accrued paid time off. They get a 401k that they're eligible for on day one. We do a 3% company contribution. It's big boy, big girl benefits. It's the benefits of a permanent job without all the strings attached.
And let's go even deeper. So like the average project size, are they working for one employer for 6 months, 12 months? What's the permanence look like?
Yeah, the W-2 focus for us is really keyed towards bigger projects. I would call maybe other things as like gig projects. If they're like, hey, come in and I need some website material developed, and it's 1 or 2 weeks. For us, a lot of our projects start out as 3-month commitments on roughly a 40-hour-a-week basis. But by the end of the projects, it's not uncommon for a role to go 1 year to 18 months on average. I think right now we're about 56 to 60 months is our average project, which
So much sense. Yeah.
brings up another sort of key detail on why W-2 is underserved. When you're working on a project for 40 hours a week, meaning you're taking a lot of work direction from one of our clients or from one employer, and you're working that long, working on a W-2 basis where we act as the employer of record mitigates misclassification for our clients, and it mitigates co-employment. So it really helps out from both sides, where our employers mitigate risk and our consultants enjoy the benefit of really longer term stable projects.
So my brain is jumping towards it's an easier off ramp, and it's actually a potentially a non off ramp, meaning that hey, we know we need to get rid of 40% across the company, but we don't want to get rid of these people. We just physically can't afford to have them on the books anymore.
Mhm.
And so that's where like my brain is jumping. But what I guess one quick question that might immediately say that I'm totally wrong. What is the percentage of people that were working at the same company then coming on your platform and working for the same company in a freelance but W-2 freelance capacity? Is that common?
Sometimes, so as the market changes, and the market really dictates what's hot at any one moment. So as companies, if we get into a softer economy and companies do layoffs, they oftentimes cut too deep, and it's not uncommon for them to cut a number of employees and then bring them right back around on as contractors, if you will, to finish out on the stuff that they were working on. But this gives the employer a lot more flexibility to manage headcount when times are a little bit unpredictable.
Yeah, that makes total sense. One thing that my brain is jumping to, and I just wonder your quick, dude, your dog is so cute. That if you listeners aren't watching the video, then you're really missing. This is going to be my favorite episode ever, purely because it's like a combination of Nat Geo with future of work talk.
Yeah.
But God, he's adorable. But so why wouldn't an employer say, hey, we're going to make hourly our go-to on-ramp, off-ramp, and every single individual that we think we need to lay off, or simply because it just makes us more efficient, why wouldn't they immediately go, okay, Ryan, please take half of our headcount, put it onto hourly? Why wouldn't they do that? And the answer might be, well, they are. It's just that good things take time. But what's your quick reaction to that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of employers, and it's been a surprise for us, a lot of employers aren't aware that solutions like us exist. They're really well educated on like your traditional temp staffing, and that education means, they view that as the expensive option. There was a number of studies where Deloitte provided some thought leadership a number of years ago that said, hey, flexible labor is the future, and companies are going to switch to a model where there's a core knowledge set, and then everybody that rotates around that is going to be a consultant, contractor, freelancer, fall in like that flexible labor bucket. But when you step back and look at that, when those employees would be 2x the cost of a perm hire, it just wasn't feasible as like a viable business strategy. But now when you leverage the power of the online labor marketplaces, it becomes a much more viable option for us. With our pricing structure and our efficiency, we're 30 to 50% less expensive than a traditional temp staffing firm, which means our bill rates are pretty comparable, maybe about 10% more than the cost of like a perm hire. So I think that education is the biggest missing factor here, and why we love to partner with Human Cloud, because you guys are doing some of that work and educating these employers that, hey, there is another way. There is talent acquisition 2.0 out there.
Yeah. So let's get deep, if we can, into it from the client perspective. So my assumption is that this is, like I said, such a phenomenal way to de-risk one of the scariest parts, which is classification, while maintaining the efficiency. And I still don't know the exact word to say it, but like the no strings attached, like no sunk cost fallacy, where it's like, hey, we're going to bring this person on for 3 months. If it doesn't work, no harm, no foul. If it does, perfect. Let's keep going. And honestly, one of the things that personally we do at Human Cloud is every single person starts as a freelancer or fractional, whatever they want to call themselves, but nobody ever starts as a full-time employee. That's just crazy to me. Everyone starts with a 1 to 3 month contract, and anywhere from $500 to $5,000 a month, depending on their seniority level. But that's, to me, how hiring just should happen. It really, to me, it seems like on both parties, right? Because on the individual side, you got to uncover some stuff that you might not like, and vice versa. But so for me, I totally get why, as a large company, I mean, you're the perfect in between let's go use a freelance marketplace totally on our own. We're going to own all the risk, to let's have a bunch of full-time employees. You're like in that middle, right? But let's get deep. So what, your customer base, is it mostly enterprise, mix of enterprise SMB? What about that first question?
Yeah, lately it's been split about 50-50. And I think we provide, even though our platform is the same across the enterprise or the SMBs, we provide a different value proposition for each of the different client bases. So our Fortune 500 companies, they love us simply because of the value prop. We're just less expensive for better talent than the traditional temporary staffing firms that are out there. And the big Fortune 500 are used to working with W-2 contractors who have an employer of record. It's the expensive button, and they've been fighting against the rising cost of those resources. So we provide them with a good alternative to get the same or better resources with significant savings. Now you flip that to SMBs, and in the past, the traditional cost of a W-2 temporary employee meant you had to choose between productivity and profitability. And that line is much finer for a small to mid-sized business. So what we provide to them when they maybe can't predict what their needs or usage might be, is they get the institutional knowledge and the buying power of a Fortune 500 company, without having to pay for these big procurement and HR teams that collect all of that data. So really what we allow them to do is punch above their weight from like a talent acquisition strategy. They can pivot quickly. They can bring in maybe knowledge sets that they don't need on a long-term basis, but they need to quickly get to where they want to go. So I think that we enable them to do more and better things by using flexible labor.
That makes total sense. So if enterprise, then cost efficiency; if SMB, then talent access. And I think one of the things I'm most excited for is the longer we go, the more that what the SMB is using, freelance and flexible talent models for, the enterprise will. And this is like, I cut my teeth initially in like Silicon Valley startups and Microsoft. this is what's always true with enterprise compared to SMB is what happens in the SMB, the end users end up doing it in the enterprise, and the enterprise needs what the SMB has, usually in waves of like 10 to 20 years, to be honest. But
Mhm.
we're on like, I would say we're on year 24 of the freelance economy, sort of in its
Yeah.
realization stage. But cool. So the actual consultants, tell me about that because consulting to me, consulting and marketing are the two industries that have this like everything and nothing at the same time sort of
Mhm.
perception in that you can tell me you're a marketer or you can tell me you're a consultant and I have no idea what that really means because a consultant can be, hey, I'm going to do an hour long expert call and I'm just going to give you management consulting frameworks. eh, or you can say, hey, I actually led, supply chain for 35 years at Maersk. And now I'm going to come in and give you a supply chain audit. And I'm like, oh my God, that's incredible. Right. But
Mhm.
so when you say consultants, tell us about the talent on your platform.
Yeah, and that's another great question because it's a pretty broad term. And right now our mix is honestly about 50-50. So we have what would traditionally be called or viewed as temporary employees, meaning some internal employee has left and there's an open chair or an employee's been pulled onto a special project. And so customers use us to bring in talent to keep the lights on and doors open. They want to keep business operations going. So you're basically doing the equivalent of a senior financial analyst or an HR generalist or a BI dashboarding or data analyst. And you're just taking on somebody else's day to day responsibilities until they can either hire for that role or until that person that's on a special project can be put back in their role. Now the other half, what maybe you and I would call consulting, which is bringing in outside knowledge, is roughly half of our business, and revolves around, hey, we want to look at a new compensation strategy. We want to really look at a different systems approach or systems efficiency or operations efficiency in a business. Oftentimes, there's an implementation component to that. Sometimes it's all three put together, where a lot of businesses are looking at sales optimization and they're like, hey, I need someone who can help me build a sales dashboard for non-financial users to help them understand our business. And we want someone who's been there, done that can come in and not only help us do that, but advise us on what we should do. So there's kind of a continuum between both of those ends. I think one of the overlooked benefits of using a temporary employee, contract employee, is that because their projects change every 6 to 18 months on average, they bring a lot of outside knowledge with them. Like, hey, I've seen this done at 10 different companies. Let me provide you with some examples on how other people are doing it. And let's pick out what's going to work best and what feels best for you. So it's sort of this cherry on top. Not only are you bringing in this specialized skill set, but typically they've seen a bunch of different ways that things have been done and can bring that extra knowledge into an organization.
And I imagine, I'm just going to throw an assumption out. Let me know if I'm totally wrong. I imagine that the talent on your platform is minimum 5+ years of experience and having corporate experience. Is that wrong or accurate?
No, I would say that's fair. It's a little bit challenging to place like new grads or entry level individuals. Quite honestly, they're best suited for a permanent hire position where a company can invest in training and development and some of those other things. And I don't think until you get at least 5 years of experience can you go in and land somewhere and value add, on day one. But it probably on the short end is 5 years, and it might be 35 or 40 years for some of our fractional, executives, interim CFOs, CHROs, those types of individuals that don't always need 40 hours at any one client. Those are the individuals that are most likely to say, hey, I've got 3 clients and they each need, 30 to 40 hours a month of my expertise. And I can keep all of them going without those customers having to pay for a full-time resource.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. We could chat for months about what to do for fresh grads,
Mhm.
because that is definitely one of the weaknesses of a flexible workforce
It
is,
is.
right? How do you train it? But then here's my quick answer to that is, well, they're going to leave after 2 years anyways. And
Yep.
so congrats, you trained them for 2 years and now they're going to take that training to somebody else. If you don't have the flexible workforce infrastructure, right, to keep them in that way, the data is just too strong to say that, hey, and I think it's not like, I remember when I started at Microsoft, this is when millennials were cool, right? So like we were the attracted group,
Mhm.
and it would be like, hey, what do millennials want? And they would talk about it in a way that's like, we need to attract this one group, but the data is so clear that like it's not just Gen Z, it's not whatever's below Gen Z, below them. It's just a generational shift for wanting more independence, more, multiple streams of income. It just is, right? And so I don't have an answer for like the college grad aspect of it, because I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know what the right answer is. I just know they're going to leave in under 2 years. So have fun training them and then having your competitor grabbing them if you don't have the right infrastructure there.
Yeah.
But your model, one of the things that, for you listeners, I think is such a crucial aspect of this is one of the biggest myths about freelance and flexible models is that they don't understand corporate, or that what we hear a lot is, this makes sense for remote, creative slash tech roles. But listen, we're a big company. We need people that understand the enterprise and understand the machine and the bureaucracy and all that kind of stuff. No, no, no. Now there is multiple models like yours to say, hey, this person looks just like the person next to you. It's just that they were external before, they're more cost efficient, and many other value props that we can talk about. So I think your model kind of helps with that a lot of like, hey, they look the same. Now I wonder, do you see any similarities when it comes to industries or skill sets, and especially right now? I mean, are you seeing an increased demands for, I'm going to say the word and I hate it, like AI, automation, supply chain, especially with tariffs right now? But what are you seeing in terms of what's hot right now and what looks like will be trending for the next 6 months?
Yeah. Great question. To put a point on your last comment, oftentimes it's not uncommon for our customers to say, "Hey, we didn't even realize that the contractor that was in here was an independent contractor. We just thought they were an employee." And it's kind of the greatest compliment where they blend in and they serve a purpose, and they seamlessly start their opportunity and then gracefully transition out when their expertise isn't needed anymore. But it's sometimes good to know that they're indistinguishable from your normal staff, which tells you about the quality.
They get a company email, right? So they have an at enterprise.com, right?
Hmm.
Okay. And then do they
Yep.
have full access under the firewall, or do they have limited access? What does their access usually look like?
Yeah, traditionally they would have the same access as a permanent employee doing that work. Really, the only difference is that we're paying them versus the client paying them, and they're
And would
doing the same
their
job.
would their email have like a V dash, or do they look internal? Because I mean, I'll give like most of our enterprise customers, right? Like we have a bunch of these, right? We have a bunch of
Yeah.
separate laptops with with emails, whatever. But some clients have the V dash email versus the normal. But do you see that at all with yours?
Not super often. There are certainly individuals that, it can be a marketing strategy to put, like, hey, here's who I am, here's my title, and I'm here on behalf of, this agency or firm. So it can be a very good thing, for us to say, like, hey, we're proud of this talent that's on board, and we want to, shout it from the mountaintops that we have great people like this. And there's times when um, employers are like, hey, here's just, you have a normal email address. You're just like, the rest of us, and no one should be the wiser that you're here on a contract basis versus a permanent hire basis.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Now, okay, tell me about on the supply side. So we understand. I understand fully on the client side why in the world I would want a W-2 independent workforce.
Yeah.
Um, But tell me about on the individual side, why does individuals want it to me makes like common sense, right? Like they
Mhm.
want the stability and the security. But do you see that? Do they stay, forever with you? Do they like this as a start? Do they end up going back to full-time employment? Why are they doing this? Give us a sort of 101 on what your, community and supply side looks like.
Yeah, it's interesting. So individuals, typically join us on a very intentional basis. To try to put a number to that, 70 to 80% of individuals are strategically looking at this as their next employment option or as a career option for them. And it's really two pronged. There's individuals who are like, I want control of my schedule. And again, that leans back to like working parents who are like, hey, I want to have a meaningful job and I want to keep contributing and building my skill set, but I need some drop off and pick up and to be able to go to events or maybe take summers off. So there's a big like flexibility component to it. And then the other group was like, hey, I don't like to sit in the same chair. It's to your point, the individuals that are probably going to be switching jobs these days every 2 to 3 years. That's just shy of what our average project is. So they feel like, hey, I can be in control. And if retail is an itch that I want to scratch, I can go after retail companies. Or if I only want to do system implementations, great. Like I don't have to work for Accenture or Deloitte to be able to do these big implementation projects. I can pick and choose what I want to do, when I want to work, what the projects look like. So they're very much in control of, the what they're doing, and that what is typically what's interesting and motivating, for them. And so that's, that 70, 80% very intentional. They're getting into this for a reason. There is, Matt, a component of individuals who've maybe gone through an unexpected job change. A company has been acquired, their role gets downsized through no fault of their own. And they're like, hey, this is an opportunity. Like, I want to stay working while I job hunt. I'm going to try out this like consulting temporary employee work strategy. And they oftentimes don't necessarily know what they're getting into, but it's not uncommon for them to do this and say, hey, this is actually great. Like, I love the control that I get from this. The compensation is great. I might just keep doing this. And so, more often than not, individuals that come into this as a career option end up staying. Now, on the flip side of that, it's not uncommon for our employers as they continue to grow their businesses and they identify great talent for them to make offers and to convert these consultants into permanent employees. And we're thrilled when that happens. It's like the ultimate compliment. And it means like, hey, there's a long-term relationship here that makes sense. And we fully support that, as well. Often knowing that whenever that full-time job runs its course, their next stop is typically back with us again. And so it's this sort of symbiotic, like circular relationship that works well for everyone.
Gotcha. Tell me what you have to do to make sure this is a good community because I understand it, right? And my brain jumps to, okay, why you and why your community versus just going to LinkedIn and sending a ping, right? Going to Upwork, going to my already existing temp staffing, partners. Tell me about what you all need to do in terms of, is there vetting? Is there a community? What's it look like to make sure that your individuals are the right ones? Because obviously it's not as simple as, hey, client, I'll get you someone in 5 days. And oh, look, they magically sit right there. What's it look like on your side?
Yeah, for us, being a marketplace does change the dynamic a little bit. And to be efficient, we don't want to employ, fleets of recruiters and salespeople. And quite honestly, clients don't love all of the sales calls with the special of the week. They like to be in control of their timing and effort. So our approach is we have a self sort of policing community where we'll let anybody that's interested in this, sign up and create a profile. And we do some self-rating and some skills evaluation and reference checking. That's a part of it. But then from there, and this maybe might seem counterintuitive, but it's an insight from quite a few years of experience that I think rings true. In the temporary staffing world, oftentimes the salesperson or the recruiter isn't super experienced at the job that they're recruiting for. They're a good recruiter. Let's not get that wrong. They're a good recruiter, but they're not necessarily a subject matter expert in that. So by trying to use people who aren't great at the role to curate, isn't a great strategy. It adds cost without benefit. So our observation was the person doing the selection, the hiring manager, and doing the interviewing is actually the best person to determine if someone's a fit. So we have a great algorithm. We have some self-scoring that we use to try to get the right person within the top 5 of the search results. And then from there, instead of us trying to determine is that person a great fit, we're like, hey, that's duplication of effort. It adds expense. Let's not pay for that, and let's let the expert, if a controller is hiring for a senior accountant, they're the best person to determine if that individual through an interview has the skill set that they need to do the job, not me. And so we drive efficiency through that. So we feel like we can build a big community and still provide high value to our clients by letting them, not do duplicate effort to the stuff that we're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. It's interesting because in this space there's so many contextual best practices, meaning that like, hey, what works here might not work there, and vice versa. And nuance, that's the word I was looking for. There's so many little nuanced details about what works and what doesn't work. And so, with that experience, what you're telling me, it works for your model. And I would assume it works for the fact that there's consultants that are going to have some sort of permanence, starting with a 3-month relationship, and they're looking to have a deep relationship with a client or 1 or 2, not necessarily always having 2 to 5, loving to sell, yada yada yada. And because of that, it makes sense to have the client do some of the interviewing and that side of it. It totally doesn't make sense if you were a low ticket, gig based marketplace that had 1,000 freelancers applying. That would be a nightmare, right? It would be like if you told me, hey, we're going to have the hiring managers own that experience, I'd be like, ooh, better hell not. Like,
Yeah.
good luck dealing with that. But because of the population that you have, and because of the uniqueness of the W-2, I think that really kind of self-filters a lot of which talent is, the quick gig-based versus the deep relational type. So that makes total sense. The sort of last thing I'd love to really hit on is to get into the challenges and specifically what you see as the top client-facing challenges, how to solve that, and hopefully in the next 5 minutes, you listeners know exactly what you want to hire, either a freelancer, an independent worker, whatever the hell you want to call them. But hopefully you listeners can walk away knowing exactly what you're going to hire for and exactly the tripwires that you're going to run into when trying to scale this across companies. So what would you say, Ryan, are like the top challenges that you see your clients getting into?
Yeah, I think the first one is really simple. That as a smaller company, trying to educate all of these employers that, hey, we're an option that exists. You can get great flexible talent at affordable rates. It seems at surface level to be a very simple message, but getting to the right people at a lot of these clients, especially the SMB clients, there's millions upon millions of them, and we're a small team, so they should know if they're watching this podcast, hey, this option exists. It's approachable, it's affordable, it's an option that allows them to take advantage of that flexible workforce model that the Fortune 500 have been using successfully for a decade. It now gives them that option from a talent acquisition perspective. So I think that's the most important aspect for them to consider is that, hey, we exist and we should be your first stop as far as evaluating what our options are for a flexible workforce.
Gotcha. What would be like the best role to think about, hey, we want to get started with this? Would it be we just want an audit of our current processes? We just want sort of a bunch of expert calls related to a specific type of expertise? Is there a project or a job rec that you see as like the best starting point and the best beachhead? Or yeah, what would you say?
Good question. I don't know if there really is. It's the best need is the need, at hand. So I think if I'm, anywhere from an enterprise client to a small to mid-sized business, you can successfully jump in and leverage, our platform for multiple reasons. Hey, we're having a tough time hiring. Hey, we're not sure where the economy's going or where our demand for our product is going, but we still have stuff we want to execute on today. So we're great for risk mitigation for maybe an open perm role that now, it's keeping you up at night. Should we really hire for that role? So I think the verticals that we support now, finance and accounting, human resources, and then what we would call like data science or data analytics, business intelligence, business systems. So if you have needs in those three verticals that you're considering, like, how do we approach this and how do we manage talent for these three verticals, having a call with us, taking a look at our platform would be definitely time well spent.
I love it. Ryan, most important question before you hop off. Where can our listeners find you? And what's the favorite toy for your little one behind? What's his favorite toy?
Listeners can find us at hourly.io. So that's OURLY.io without the Minnesota accent. And for the big boy behind me, I think his favorite toy is our three kids. Like, he is a people person, and the more interaction that he can have with them, is the best. But on a day when they're not around, he has a little white stuffed lamb that he loves to carry around and show off. I think that's the common golden retriever favorite toy.
Either that or socks. So I was like looking around.
They're a must.
They're a must, and he hoards them. So like in his bed in the living room, there's just like a ton of socks and lambs, and it's wicked embarrassing. If he goes to like a new house, he'll grab like their socks and I have to be like, all right, everyone, make sure your underwear is in a closet because he will grab it. But listen, Ryan, thank you. First of many, thank you so much for hopping on.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Love what you guys are doing. Glad to be a partner of Human Cloud.